out to you. So today we are coming to you Facebook Live and via Zoom with two of our top Bossier state representatives, one from the House side, one from the Senate side. So we have with us Senator Barrow Peacock and State Representative Raymond Crews with us today, who are going to give us an update. But before we go to them, I would like to introduce you to our Government Relations Chair, Mike McSwain with McSwain Architect, and to give us a word of welcome and say a few remarks. So Mike, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm Mike McSwain. I'm the Government Relations Chair for the Bossier Chamber of Commerce. Glad you guys are all here. I'm excited to hear about the upcoming session. My fingers are crossed that we're not going to have a special session between now and then, but I am looking forward to good positive things coming this session, and welcome everybody.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Mike. Well, it is now my pleasure. We're just going to get right into this. This year is a fiscal session, and the legislative session starts on April 12th and will run through, let me look at my calendar over here, through June date. And so we've got a lot of things to talk about and be prepared for. And so I'm going to start with Senator Barrow Peacock to open us up with some remarks and tell us what we can expect from the Senate side in this fiscal session, and how can we, as the business community, how can we assist, help, and be engaged? So, Senator Peacock, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. And it's June the 10th by 6 o'clock. We have to be done for our Constitution. And Mike, to your question, we won't have a special session between now and when we start. I am hearing some rumblings, and it was just earlier today on a Zoom call with the Louisiana Bankers Association. They were talking about the new stimulus package coming out of Washington, whether we would need a special session to allocate some of those funding sources down the road. I would hope that we could do it in this session, but if we don't have enough direction from how the money can be allocated and spent wisely and correctly, we might have to have one later in the year. So, and then also there's looking for redistricting, a special session probably early next year on redistricting for our state, and that would be for our congressional lines, legislatively, and public service commissioners doing those district lines too. So it's very likely that we're going to have at least one for redistricting, and maybe with the federal stimulus money coming in. And when we talk about federal stimulus, and Lisa, I sent you this thing. We as a state, between last year and this year, we'll receive $13.7 billion.
Would you like for me to share that?
Sure. And one of the things that we have to be good stewards of, we definitely want to use that money wisely in the state of Louisiana. But when we have to say wisely, we have to make sure it is not going to be used for reoccurring expenses. So if you look at the first part, the CARES Act of 2020, that was $2.4 billion. So that's been done. The legislature had met since that, and that money has been allocated. But if you look at the next two, the act that was passed in December 2020, the $1.7 billion. And then the one that was just passed by Congress, the $9.5 billion. Those two together, the legislature has not met. And some of that's going directly to local governments and to our schools and to higher ed, but some of it is coming through the state legislature. And we have to make sure that we follow the guidelines, but also not do things that will put us in a corner 2 years down the road, which is going to be very tricky, and there's going to be a lot of temptations to do things with the money that we probably shouldn't be doing. But the important thing is that we use that. Being a fiscal session, we are limited to fiscal bills. We can do 5 general bills, and we can do locally advertised bills. Now, if the legislature was to pass any revenues or pass any new taxes, that would have to start in the House of Representatives. The Senate can never start a tax. Not that I would want to increase taxes, but that would be something that have to start in the House where they can appropriate and tax first. I will have 7 bills that I'm going to introduce during the session. 2 of them are fiscal in nature, and the first one, which is really something I'm pretty passionate about, is Senate Bill 1, and it's to put money towards infrastructure in our state. It is to rededicate the 0.45 temporary sales tax starting next year to roads and bridges, and taper that in, phase it in over the next 3 years to 2025, to where roughly $450 million a year additional state money would be going to infrastructure. If we want to avoid another fiscal cliff down the road, we need to wean ourselves off of that sales tax. This would allow us to put money towards infrastructure, see if DOTD can gain the trust of the citizens of Louisiana that they would be good stewards of the money and put it towards the actual projects, the roads and bridges, and not spend it on overhead and administrative costs. And if they do that, then down the road, possibly renew the 0.45 sales tax. Our neighbors to the west, Texas, they have roughly the same gas tax we have, but they dedicate a half a penny of their sales tax to roads and bridges. So this is something that they do, and it helps in their funding of their roads. And if companies like General Motors are truly going to go to a pure electric fleet of vehicles, no matter what you would pass in a gas tax would be there in the future. So I think this is a good alternative. This way, whether you're driving the Ford F-250 or the Tesla to the store, everybody would be paying a sales tax to go towards our infrastructure in our state. The other bills that I'm going to be looking forward to, I'm going to do a bill to try to help with crime. And it's basically based off of a Florida law. And what the bill will do is, if a individual who is age 18 to 23 committed a crime of violence as a minor, as a child, they would lose their right to have a firearm until they're age 24. Currently, if someone does a crime of violence as a minor, the slate is clean for them to where they could have a firearm as a 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old, even 23. This is something to say if someone did a crime that would, if you did it as an adult, you couldn't have a firearm. This would say if you did it as a minor, you couldn't have a firearm for 5 years to see if you really have changed. And it's something that I feel like we need to somehow address our crime problem in our state. And it's something the state of Florida has done, and I hope it's something that we can do. I've reached out to law enforcement and to our district attorneys to get support from them and get their input. I'm also going to do a bill on medical devices advertising. This is one that I was going to do last year, but due to COVID, I was not able to move forward with it. And this bill is basically going to be a bill that you see them sometimes where they say, if you're taking XYZ medicine, stop, call this number. And they'll use advertisement like this Department of Health has said this drug might be dangerous to you. And we're having people who are literally stopping taking their medicine, say on a Friday afternoon, and then they have a stroke on Sunday. So this is going to be some guidelines of what you can put in an advertisement that is dealing with medical devices, and something to really, it's a consumer protection bill that Johnson & Johnson has asked for me to carry, so I'm glad to do that. Another bill that I want to do is transfer on death, and this is for brokerage accounts. And one thing I've been very passionate about, whenever Louisiana is an outlier, when we're doing something different from all the other states, you really have to wonder, well, are we doing it better, or is there something that we need to change? Like in the past, I've done the nursing compact to bring Louisiana into the to working with other states and making it easier for our military spouses to be nurses in Louisiana. Well, this one is for brokerage accounts. Currently in 49 other states, you can sign a form and you can transfer the assets in a brokerage account to who you designate. And the brokerage firm keeps that documentation, and on death, the document, and the assets are transferred to who you designate instead of having to open a succession and probate. 49 other states can do it. If we actually have Louisiana people who are having broker accounts in other states who are technically already doing it, we need to modernize our system in Louisiana and allow it to be done here in Louisiana. Now, there's going to be some pushback from the estate lawyers. They're saying that we have community property laws and forced heirship laws in Louisiana, but it's something that we're going to tailor it for Louisiana and hopefully pass the bill. Another bill that I'm going to try to do is raise the age of retirement for new hires only for our state retirement system, our Louisiana state retirement, the teachers, and our school employees, not for hazardous duty, but raise it to age 67, which is the same as Social Security, and then index it going forward. One of the good things about today is we're all living longer. And this is something that I think that we need to continue to move forward with our retirement system. It's not going to change anything for anybody who's currently working as a teacher or a state employee or a school employee. But moving forward, it should help. And it should, if we want our retirement systems to be sound financially for the long term, we have to continue to evolve. And the good thing is we're all living longer. So it doesn't work when you can be retired longer than you were actually a working member of the retirement system. It's simple math on that. So I'm going to do that. And then the one other bill that I'm going to do is for our military children for Barksdale. Dale Vanderhay, who is with the Department of Defense out of San Antonio, has been a good friend of mine, and I've reached out to him. What is the military looking for to help families? And one of the things that they said that they want is when a airman or at Fort Polk, military, get their orders and are moving to our area, that their children immediately upon getting those orders would be able to register classes that they want to take in schools. So if you're moving and you're going to Parkway or you're going to Airline or Russian, any school, and you have electives, that those children, and it would be in state law, so it'd be all over the state, that they would be able to then say, I'm coming to Bossier, I want to sign up for my classes, and they usually get their orders in the spring, but they usually are not here in Bossier until July or August or June, and a lot of times those classes are already filled. So this is something that the Department of Defense has asked that we put in state law, and it's something that we need to, as a community, need to have that to send the message to the airmen and women who are coming to Barksdale that we want to be supportive of not only them who are serving, but their families. And that's something I've done with the compact bills and something I think that we can do to help with their children, to give them the sense that when they're moving to Bossier and they're worried about their kids' education, that they can register for those classes once they have their orders in hand. And this is something the Department of Defense is encouraging. We do a lot to welcome people to our community, but putting it in state law really, it puts it out there. It's not just window dressing. It's the real deal when we do that. And then the last bill that I'm going to do, we actually, and when we talk about funding our roads and bridges, we actually give a tax credit of $2,500 or 10% of the value of a vehicle, which is an electric vehicle. So if you're buying an electric vehicle, you get $2,500 from the state of Louisiana, and you pay zero on gas tax. I have a bill to take that credit away as of July 1. It's going to expire the end of the year anyway, but what really hit home to me is if we're going to more and more electric vehicles, we as a state cannot afford to give everybody who buys an electric vehicle $2,500 in a tax credit. So those are the bills that I'm going to do. One thing I'll tell you about this session coming up, and a lot of people say, oh, it's a short session. It is. It's only 2 months, but it is a very high intensity session. Mm-hmm. I have to have my Senate bills done in 4 weeks in the Senate and over to the House. And the House has to have their bills basically done in 4 weeks and over to the Senate. So the bills have to cross a whole lot sooner. And things are a whole lot more fast-paced in this session than a normal general session, which is March through June. So it's going to be fast-paced, staying engaged. I will tell you, the Bossier Chamber does a good job. President, the Bossier Press Tribune does a good job covering what we're doing, but stay engaged with the process. Our website is good. And let us know, not only us locally, but when there is an item that is important to our area, don't just call me and Representative Crews, call and email representatives across the state. I will tell you, Jefferson Parish knows how to contact my office better probably than anywhere else in the state. We've got to do a better job here from our area, letting people know in Lafayette, Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, New Orleans area, North Shore, what's important to us. They need to know how much we want I-49 and the Jimmy Davis Bridge, and how that we want job growth here. And we're competing with Texas that is 18 miles from the heart of our community. And us being engaged in what you're doing, Lisa, in the chamber, but all the members at advocacy, they need to hear it. And when people start calling and emailing, and it needs to be a personal, don't do just a paste and click and paste and send, make it personal. This is important. It does help. I pay attention to who contacts my office, and I know my fellow legislators do too. So I'm looking forward to any questions y'all might have.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, if you have any questions for our guest today, if you would put those in the chat box and we will address those at the end. And if you're on Facebook, if you would put those in the comments, we will address those at the end as well. It is now my pleasure let's move to the House side and let's talk to our Bossier representative, State Representative Raymond Crews, who is in your second term, so we can't call you a freshman anymore. You are now old hat at this.
Yeah, I think my gray hair would testify otherwise as well.
So Raymond, can you please give us an update on, from your perspective, what's your priorities?
Well, sure. First of all, thank you for having this. I appreciate the chamber and your participation in these type of matters. And thanks, Senator Peacock, for leading out here. So that helps trim down just exactly what to talk about. But, the big thing, like he did focus, it's a fiscal session, so taxes are going to be an issue. Thankfully, the news we've had is better than anticipated on a lot of fronts. They got revenue for the state in areas that weren't anticipated, which when you look in retrospect, maybe it would be anticipated. For instance, they thought that gaming revenue in terms of video poker would go down, and they found out, well, guess what? During a pandemic, when people are at home and are getting checks, they still play video poker. So they actually had to adjust their figures for increase in video poker. But this year, what the big focus is going to be, like I was mentioned in several meetings in the last week or two, is going to be tax policy. There's a big concern that in our state, our tax policy is confusing, for one. So when a business is looking to relocate and they look at different rankings, they look at Louisiana and they're like, I don't think so. That's confusing, for one. It seems onerous. We can't figure out all the carve outs for different exemptions and whatnot. So it's a big process. It should be easier. It should be very easy, where you can figure out, hey, if I have a business, I relocate to Louisiana, here's what it's going to cost me. Or if I open a new branch or a new facility or whatever, and it's not. So there's a big effort to change that and simplify it, to reduce the number of brackets and whatnot. But of course, we know the devil's in the detail, and it's going to be difficult to get everybody on board. And it was mentioned just last night at a meeting that people are going to be afraid of change. I mean, we're all a little bit resistant to change. It means some adjustments on our part. And a lot of times there'll be individuals or groups or companies that benefit from a certain exemption or a certain way of taxation that they may not want to give up on. So all the rest of us, we really need to get together and unify and say, you know what, we need what's best for everybody. And simplification is a big step right there. If we could get all the corporate taxes at one rate, whatever that rate ends up being, it would be preferable to have an entire book of different exemptions and different tax rates for different types of companies, whatnot. So we need to simplify. Another issue that's going to be get a lot of attention has to do with the taxation of the internet businesses, basically. So Amazon, eBay, wherever you shop, we're trying to get a centralized collection system to where when they collect taxes from the people purchasing goods, that it can come to the state and get redistributed to where it belongs, where it should go. Of course, that redistribution is going to be something that's questioned by all kinds of people and all different interests. So it'll be very interesting and very difficult, I'm sure, at times to see that work out, but that's going to be a big one. Of course, there are some people out there that won't want it at all. They like buying from Amazon and paying no tax. And well, that has been the case in the past, but they like avoiding taxes altogether. And they may even justify it saying, listen, nothing was produced in the state of Louisiana from this thing. Why should Louisiana get a cut of it? So there'll be arguments to counter and to, engage in on these topics. So it's just going to be a very interesting thing. And like Senator Peacock said, we have a great resource on the web for the legislature in terms of watching the meetings as they go on, hearing the testimony, submitting questions. You can even do all that stuff remotely now. So it's going to be a time where I think the citizens that are engaged need to be more engaged and get online and see what's going on and register your opinions, complaints, suggestions, whatever they are. And also to extend on what Senator Peacock said, those other representatives and senators around the state, while they focus on their constituents primarily, a lot of times they get, like real tunnel vision. And wherever they live is they think that's how the state thinks. And I think it's important for the rest of the state that has a differing opinion to get out there and let them know that, hey, we don't put a premium on X or Y, we put it on Z. And it's very important for them to get that. Even if you're not a constituent, they need to know there's a Louisiana above I-10. So I would like to echo that. Senator Peacock mentioned a couple things I just wanted to touch on there. First, to continue on taxes, no matter what we do, we should realize that people change their behavior based on the incentives. So if you're going to change the tax system and they've been benefiting in one way and you change it to another, they can adjust and they're going to adjust and they're going to try to find that way that's most beneficial. And that's just reasonable behavior. So we should expect, even though we prognosticate, oh, we're going to collect this much in this area and that area, that people are going to change their behavior, and it's going to be difficult to accurately predict just how it's all going to fall out. But I think we can agree that simplification is going to be key to Louisiana going forward. Senator Peacock's got a bill addressing crime, and I wanted to mention one thing here that I see endemic to Louisiana. That's I guess the focal point for our problems with crime, with income, with school, with education, with out of wedlock childbirth, all these things. And that's the breakdown of the two-parent family. And that's a real travesty for Louisiana. And until we can address that and incentivize people to stay together when they can and to have fathers play a part in the family, those are essential things. And you can see when you have an absent father, crime's up, education's down, dropout rates are up, you name it, across the board. You can go check some of these websites out and look at the fatherless generation. And things are just bad. That's not the way it was designed, and that's not the way we should play out with the state playing the nanny. We need parents to step up and do their jobs. He had mentioned age 67 for new state employees, and I just wanted to echo that and commend them on that effort. I think we've got to look at our continuing expenses for the state and realize we've got a huge amount of debt on our hands, and we've got to address this in a reasonable fashion. And if the rest of society is going to look at age 67 as retirement, as much as we'd like it to be 50 or whatever in Louisiana, it just can't be and be competitive. So I congratulate you on that effort, and I wish you good luck there, Senator Peacock. I also liked your effort on encouraging the military to come here. As we know, Fort Polk, Barksdale, they're facilities around the state, And it's very important to let the military know this is a great place, and to do what we can to encourage them to look forward to Louisiana, and in a lot of cases stay here. My two business partners and I, all three of us are from out of state, and guess what? We're still here. So retirees stay, and retirees can be a good benefit to the community, me notwithstanding. Kidding. But I mean, a lot of people out there make their decision on their base on what the community's like. What is the education like? What's the school system? What's the church system like? What's the social atmosphere? So whatever we can do to make them feel like that we want this to be their home, I think that would be a good move. One other thing, the electric vehicles. I always kind of laugh at this one because one of my businesses has a lot to do with energy. We got into it because we're all three Air Force. And in my last deployment, we burnt 1 million gallons of gas going overseas with one airplane. So when you think about that, and that was the tankers refilling us and all that. But when you think about that, that's a huge amount. So we said, well, what can we do to reduce our dependence on foreign oil? And the country's done great. You know, last year we were a net exporter of oil. So that's fantastic. But the problem is when people look at electricity and think, hey, we can go further, they're not looking at what we call embodied energy. You have to get certain kind of chemicals to make the batteries. You've got to get the labor to get that material. And a lot of that material is in places like South Africa and South America. And we have teenagers and younger mining these very dangerous chemicals to make batteries and whatnot. So that's one of it. And the embodied energy part I'm talking about is it actually takes more money to manufacture an electric car than you'll use in your car in, say, 10 or 15 years, depending on the model. So there is something called embodied energy. It takes energy to produce these vehicles, and it's more than it takes for an internal combustion engine. So to think that you're just saving the atmosphere right off the bat is really ludicrous. And I wish people would take a little bit more time to look at just what it means to produce all these things that we think are advances. So an electric vehicle credit really doesn't make sense because it is costing the environment. It's costing the environment in the manufacture of the vehicle. It still gets its energy from somewhere else, believe it or not, whether it be a coal-fired plant, a gas-fired plant, a solar wind farm, whatever. That electricity doesn't just come from the car. It's fed electricity from some power generation source. So we got to treat them fairly and equally, I think. On my side, my bills, I'm in appropriations. So tomorrow I'm going to be down there for 3 hours. We conduct hearings to see what's going on with all the different departments, what their asks are, their desires, where the shortfalls are. And that might be a little bit dry, but if you get the chance, that might be something to tune into and see a particular department you're interested in and see just where they spend their money. Does it make sense to you? And are you getting a bang for the buck? And that kind of leads back to the taxes thing and the infrastructure. I honestly believe that the citizens of Louisiana would go for a gas tax. I'm not proposing it. I'm not advocating for it. But the only way you're going to get them to go for something like that is if they know their money is being used appropriately. And right now, the citizens don't think that. They don't think you could increase, you could add 3 pennies to the gallon and anything would change in the state of Louisiana. So I think it's very important for us to fix what we can with DOTD and their processes before we ever think about collecting more money. It's not wise to throw good money after bad. We've got to fix the system. So I will not be advocating for that because I don't think the system's fixed. And until it is fixed, I can't even consider that. I've got a bill that's going to attempt to restore something within the National Guard. The Louisiana National Guard was designed for Louisiana's benefit, not for the federal government. And for decades now, we have been sending our boys and girls overseas in undeclared wars. And this is from a military veteran. I understand the need for going overseas, but sending a guardsman or woman overseas without a declared war is really an aberration of what was intended by the founders of the country. The problem is, unless a bunch of states get on board with this, it's going to be a real hurdle because we don't want the federal government taking any of our dollars and shifting it somewhere else as some type of punishment. So that'll be a hurdle there. Some other bills, I do have two local bills concerning the airport, the downtown airport. Being a pilot, a lot of people have contacted me about that. And there's an issue there with expecting a certain dollar value improvements on hangars when there may be a perfectly good hanger. You may have spent $1 million on it and it's the best hanger out there, yet they still want you to spend money to renew your lease. And that's just not consistent with the purpose of those FAA recommendations. So we're going to try to address that. I've got several others there, but I don't want to take up all your time. I want to give time for questions or conversation on other issues. But once again, I appreciate your involvement, your engagement, and I'd appreciate it if you would call other legislators as well as Senator Peacock and I when these issues come to the fore.
Thank you, Representative Raymond Crews. Thank you for that insight. And actually, I was going to come back to both of you about infrastructure. So before I do that, as a reminder to everyone on the call, if you have a question, please put it in the chat box and we will address that. And if you're on Facebook Live, put it in the comments there and we will address it. But I was, thank you for talking about the gas tax and infrastructure. It is a very difficult topic to talk about. And we know that the infrastructure in the state of Louisiana has critical needs and improvement. We have several folks that are on the call that are very interested in that and work in those arenas and advocate for those arenas as well. So we have talked tirelessly in the past about the I-49 interchange, and we're still working very hard for that and appreciate any support in that area. The Jimmy Davis Bridge, we know, is another hot topic on the Bossier side as well. So being a Twin City community, we have both of these very strong infrastructure projects that we know need to happen for economic development and prosperity for our area. And so we appreciate all that you're doing to make that happen. And then, of course, you know, we need a rebuild on our roads and our bridges are, but it's not a problem that's unique to us. It's a nationwide problem, but we want to be the front runners if we can. So anything that y'all can do to assist. And I completely concur. For all of you that are on the call, please contact your state elected officials and talk to them, send the messages and let them know what your concerns are, because it's much easier when they're in a committee meeting if they have personal stories to talk about. We do have a question here in the chat box, gentlemen, and it is from Tamara Crane, who's with the Bossier Council on Aging. Will there be an emergency increase in unemployment due to all the payments during COVID? Will there be an emergency increase in unemployment tax due to all the payments during COVID? Take out emergency, will there be an increase? I think we know what she's asking.
Raymond, do you want to answer or would you like me to address?
Well, I can tell you right now that the fund balance is not good, and it's probably negative at this point. I actually haven't checked. I'll find out again tomorrow. But there is a programmed increase in that tax to employers. What's going to happen eventually, I don't know, but I know that's programmed in there, and there probably will be. But I don't know if there's another way that can be addressed that I'm not aware of.
We have, from my understanding, we've borrowed about 180 plus million, I believe it's $186 million from the federal government to shore up our unemployment trust fund. We have passed in the special session last October, we passed laws to delay any increase in the unemployment tax on businesses. Now that we do have the additional $9.5 billion, which 3.2 is coming to the state, there is a push to use some of that 3.2 billion, which is one-time money, to shore up the unemployment trust fund. So that should help, and that way we won't be having to increase the tax on the unemployment tax for our businesses. But there will be nothing that will happen this year. We delayed everything at least till 2021. And if we do not use the stimulus money, then at some point you have to start paying the federal government back for that money. So I would see us using some of that 3.2 billion to shore up our unemployment trust fund to a level, hopefully, to where we can keep the current level of tax, which is one of the best in the country, the lowest in the country at this current level, not to put an additional burden on our businesses that have survived through the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hey, I did want to comment real quick. Representative Larry Freeman has worked in workers' comp for years, and he's a stalwart on this, and I think he's going to be able to give us some insight into this that previously wasn't available, and he's really asking the good questions, and I encourage you to watch him, particularly if you're interested in the Workforce Commission and workers' comp.
And I see, Lisa, there's a question that says it's sad because LW isn't really pursuing fraudulent claims. So business, I will say that our state is, we get, since I would say probably January or December, the state has done a lot to prevent fraud. And there have been a lot of people who've been very frustrated that the Workforce Commission is doing more checking on who's getting this. And we've been contacted, but they are doing a diligent. There is fraud that has been done not only in Louisiana but across the state. But they have increased the check to make sure that it's not going forward. So the state has done that. Now, unfortunately, when you have more checks, it slows down the unemployment benefits going out the door. But I can show you a list of people who have called our office, are frustrated that they aren't, but it's because of the safety measures that the Workforce Commission is administering now to prevent fraud.
And I'll echo that. Secretary Dejoie has been pursuing that, but unfortunately, she's saying the problem is now she doesn't have enough workers to pursue all this. So there's a, that comes back to we need more money. But I can tell you there is a focus on that. And I think they're doing a diligent effort, but there can always be more done.
So just to talk about workers, whenever you get into that, I've been talking to small businesses, especially restaurateurs here in the last several days, and there is a tremendous need for workers. The employment opportunities are out there, and they are having a very difficult time finding those employees, and are extremely short-staffed. So, and we know that there's a variety of issues as to why this is a problem. Some of the stimulus money coming down, and the COVID pandemic, and what have you. And so, but it is definitely an issue for our small businesses, and to find that workforce that is needed so that they can keep their business running and remain solvent. We do have a couple of more questions here from Kent Rogers. What is the possibility of treating the new federal COVID funds as if they are surplus funds and use them towards those limited uses, with the addition of putting some towards the unemployment fund?
And that, I think part of that money will be put towards the unemployment trust fund. I mean, that will be done. That is a one-time. We need to short back, pay back the $187 million we've already borrowed. And then also put a surplus in there. So you'll see that happen. We actually put some money, I believe 80-something million, into the unemployment trust fund in October with the resources we had. And you'll see that happen in this session coming up. We will put money towards the unemployment trust.
I will say that there might be a possible challenge on that, though, because if that's viewed as a reduction in taxes, because we would have had an employment tax increase to cover that. And if they say, well, you could have done that instead, they may challenge that and say, hey, these funds are specifically not to be used for reducing taxes. So it just kind of depends on who's interpreting and how they spend that.
Thank you. Patrick Harrison is asking, will there be any consideration for the budget adjustments due to the validity of oil and gas due to newly proposed restrictions on oil exploration and permits in the Gulf?
Budget adjustments due to the volatility of oil and gas. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Does that mean we'll spend less? I wish I could say that were true, but probably not. But will that be kept in mind? Will people keep that in mind? Yes. But oil and gas is unfortunately becoming a smaller and smaller piece of the budget. So I'll refer to the senator to add comments on that.
In the offshore drilling is something that we need to look at, and we're concerned. Also, our coastal legacy lawsuits what they're doing. Production in Louisiana continues to taper off. Companies are not investing in Louisiana to drill, not only offshore with the federal pullbacks, but onshore and on land. We're sort of seeing that wildlife and fisheries is now, they're usually a self-sustaining department in the budget, and they're asking for $20 million this year to operate. Well, they used to get a lot of mineral revenue, and wells need to be reworked and new wells need to produce. And you're starting to see that drop off, and there's the question that's being raised there. Well, with the coastal lawsuits, these companies, these oil and gas companies, are not investing their assets to produce new minerals in Louisiana. They're going to North Dakota, they're going to New Mexico, they're going to Texas. So it's not only what the federal government, it's what our legal environment is doing to us also. And when you see production going down in Louisiana, it's troublesome that we're not keeping up, and it's in our legal environment, and it's something that we fought over last year in the legislature. We were trying to get a bill through. We were not successful. There's been the agreement from the Attorney General for the Freeport-McMoran agreement, which is very controversial of how the structure is going to work. All these companies basically had oil permits to drill in Louisiana, and we're now changing the rules and we're suing them. There are 39 lawsuits, 39 or 41 lawsuits out there suing the oil and gas companies, and it just doesn't make Louisiana look like a good place for businesses to invest when you have those legacy lawsuits, especially in the coastal zones out there for our state.
So we have from Mr. Rocket, there continues to be talk of changes in the state's incentive programs. There's already enough difficulty, as you've said, as we've talked about, in recruiting new businesses based on reputation and unclear taxation. What do you see that may have legs and, might be able to pass through this session? And I'm going to just kind of couple that with, we've talked about offline, Senator, that our government relations chair, Mike McSwain, has been looking at population numbers, and we're seeing a decrease in our population. And you and I, we talked about many of these things that Rocky is asking here, that we have to have some kind of reform and some restructuring. So can you please address Rocky's question and assist us in that?
One of the things is we need to look good on paper. We don't need to have it where it's very complicated to get to that base tax level. One of the pushes going to be is to lower the individual income tax level from 6% to 4%, but we're going to want to do away with the federal income tax deduction. That's going to take a constitutional amendment. The same, we're going to try to do it on the corporate level from 8% to 5%. So when companies are looking at Louisiana, they say the tax rate in Louisiana is this level and not the high 8%. We need to continue to streamline, make things simple in our state. The corporate franchise tax, which is basically a wealth tax on businesses. We're one of the few states that still have the franchise tax. I believe 4 states are phasing it out. And it's something that we actually, unfortunately, 4 years ago, increased the franchise tax to LLCs in Louisiana. It was the wrong direction. So those are items we need to do. I also one thing, go back to the centralized sales tax. We're one of only 3 states that does not have a centralized sales tax system. And we need to do that to, when we want our retail businesses in our communities to be on a level playing field with internet, we've got to centralize our sales tax. And for our local governments, that unfortunately, one of the things which is really amazing being in the legislature is sometimes I realize who lobbies state government more than any, it's local governments. And some of it is they don't want to see the tax collection of sales tax at a centralized location. But you're leaving money on the table by not having a centralized sales tax collection. We've got to do it as a state. It's going to level the playing field for our retail local businesses, and it's going to make us more attractive for businesses to want to do here. And I've been told we are very close. What system we're doing right now is sort of I think we're going to be challenged. And if they win and we don't have a centralized sales tax, we're not going to collect any internet tax because they're not going to have to remit it to Louisiana because we're so difficult to do business with.
You know, when I was listening to that and hearing some commentary on this last night, I thought of that old saying that, you know, you lock your doors to keep honest people honest. I imagine a lot of people have heard of that. And it's been on the books for years that you're supposed to claim all those out-of-state purchases and pay taxes on them. But let's face it, that's not going to happen with a little bit of incentive. And that's really what centralized sales tax collection is. It's going to say, listen, we're going to charge it for you so you don't have to deal with the moral and ethical thought of, well, am I going to claim this and tell the government? And it's the big thing on it is local businesses are losing out because you have to pay it there. There's no option. They collect it right there at the register. And yet online sellers are able to get away without doing that. And they're not maintaining the storefront. They're not contributing jobs to the local economy. So it just makes the system more fair.
We're approaching the top of the hour, but it does appear that probably the number one conversation that we're going to have during this fiscal session is going to be under the tax reform is going to be the centralized taxation. Do you agree with that? Does that feel like that is going to be one of the top 2 or 3 conversations throughout the entire session?
Sure.
I think it will be, and we're going to have to amend the Constitution to do it. So it's 70 votes, and they had a commission that met in the interim, and they're putting forward the plan from the interim. But still 70 votes is very hard. And when you start digging into the weeds, some parishes, the sheriff is the tax collector. In one parish, I know in South Louisiana, the sheriff funds his office by keeping 10% of all sales tax collected in that parish to fund the operation of the sheriff's department. So they're going to have to be adjustments made. And when you start doing that, then sheriffs start getting nervous and people, but it can be done. And we need to do it as a state to move this whole state forward. And I hope that they'll find a way to work through the problems versus just throwing up their hands and saying no.
And for the business community to narrow things down a little bit, do you think that we may make some progress this year on reforming of corporate taxes, inventory taxes, franchise taxes, or is that going to be another year of conversations? I am looking to you two gentlemen as though you have this 8 vision ball that you know. So we are seriously. What do you think about that? Do you think we're going to have some successful conversations and votes on the end?
Boy, I'll let him be the lead prognosticator, then I'll follow up.
You know, I think that the goal will be to do tax reform that's revenue neutral. One of the provisions in the American Recovery Plan that was passed by Congress, they put an amendment in there saying you can't reduce taxes. You can't use these funds to reduce taxes. And there's some discussion, well, what does that mean? If we can keep it revenue neutral, we're not raising that, but if we could run into some problems. The corporate franchise tax, it's a horrible tax we need to do away with. It's going to be hard to eliminate. The inventory tax, one of the provisions that's been discussed is with the change in ITEP, that local governments are now able to keep 20% of ITEP, and there's an 80% exemption. That if the legislature made that permanent, maybe that could be a trade-off for the inventory tax, that we would do away with the inventory tax, which is in the concept, but we will put in law that ITEP would be 80-20, and which would help schools and business and local governments when a business comes to our state. But inventory tax, I've got a sheet that St. James Parish gets 26.8% of their revenue from inventory tax. So the moment you start saying you're going to do away with the inventory tax, you've got some parishes. I know 4 parishes in our state that they're all over 20% of their revenue comes from inventory. So they're things that sound real good, but then you got to start figuring out how do you still make everything work together, because you can't just go in there with a sledgehammer. For Bossier, it is 7% of Bossier Parish's property, Avalon property tax comes from inventory tax. And that was 2019 tax rules.
I think, Senator, if you don't mind, if you will go back and repeat, because the provision that's in the stimulus package that you cannot lower taxes and use this money, I think it is very important for folks to understand that. And those of us that are reading the stimulus funding and the bills that are coming down, we know that, but the general public is not going to understand that. And so just for the record, if you'll say that one more time.
Okay. There's a provision in the stimulus package that, and I don't have the exact language in front of me, that was passed in the last 10 days by Congress, that basically said you cannot use the $3.2 billion that's coming to state government and use that money to lower your taxes. So we are not able, we cannot offset taxes with that money coming in. Now, we can keep things revenue neutral, but we can't say we're getting a windfall, do away with income tax for 1 year. We would have to give the money back. Now, there are some attorney generals who are challenging that, saying the federal government doesn't have the right to tell states how to manage their tax matter, but that's for the courts to determine. But we have to be very mindful that we don't get ourselves into problems with when we want to start doing reform, but we also want to, stand up for our state and tell the federal government, we do want to make some changes that will make Louisiana a better place for jobs and for business growth.
Well, thank you. So, Representative Crews, if you will tell those of us that are on the call and on Facebook Live, what can we do to assist you during this session when it starts here in just a short time from now on April 12th?
Encouragement, even when things aren't going exactly the way you want them to go, is important. If we reach the objective, making taxes more easy to understand and simpler and attractive to people locating in Louisiana or even remaining in Louisiana. We see that all the time, people outflowing. If we can get that objective, we may have to put some of our personal desires on exactly how to do it to the wayside, as long as it's advancing the agenda. And that's difficult for anyone to do, is to say, hey, I prefer this, but this would get me some of the way there, and just accept a compromise. But a lot of times, what compromise we've seen in Louisiana legislature is all or nothing. So we're hoping that this at least will advance us as a state. And next year we'll look back and go, hey, look, things are getting better here. Businesses are locating, some that were considering leaving or staying. We continue to work on tort reform. We just want to make this an attractive place for businesses to locate and stay, because that means more employees, and we got employees, we've got citizens that need jobs. So everything will be a lot better if we can focus on the simplification.
Yes, sir. And Senator Peacock, what can we do to assist you?
Stay engaged. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This last year with tort reform, we moved in the right direction, and we worked to a level that Governor Edwards could agree to tort reform, and he signed the bill. We have to keep moving forward and finding ways that we can move forward on our state, and not say we want everything and not realize we're moving in the right direction. So we might not get everywhere with our tax structure this year, but if we can move in the right direction, if we can at least get the constitutional amendments rolling on centralized sales tax, and then we'll come back next year. What's very frustrating is things take so much time, not only at the federal level, but the state level, to make the changes. But if we can continue to move the ball, get the first down and keep moving and keep the ball moving, and not, then we're moving our state forward. And I think we proved that this last year with tort reform. It wasn't perfect, but now this last week, farmers insurance is coming back to Louisiana, which is great for our state. It means great for our consumers. more competition. So those are examples of where, when we can find the ways to move forward and something that Governor Edwards is agreeable to, then we'll improve this environment for all of our citizens.
And I hope some more people have seen that on the insurance stuff. Yeah, farmers came back, but my personal rates, I was able to find a competitor to my previous company and reduce my insurance significantly because the competition's there now. They're realizing, hey, we can step up this game a little bit. So I was happy, and I hope some other people are starting to report that around the state.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to throw it back to our Government Relations Chair, Mike McSwain, to kind of close us out. Mike?
Thanks so much, Senator Peacock and Representative Crews. Just want you to know a big thank you from all of us at the Chamber, and especially the Government Relations Committee. Anything we can do to support you guys, just know we're here for you, and we're rooting for you, and we're here to help you. So we thank you very much for this session today. Looking forward to all the positive news coming ahead in the session. Thanks so much.
Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our participants. Y'all have a great day, and pay attention to our website and our newsletters for what's coming up next. Have a great day.
Good day.
Bye-bye.